You're standing at the edge of a bounce house at your nephew's birthday party, holding a paper plate with a slice of cake nobody's going to finish, watching your 6-year-old daughter melt down in the specific, total way 6-year-olds melt down, because you just told her no, she can't have a second cotton candy, and in her mind this refusal makes no sense at all, because she watched you pay for the first one without even checking the price. She's not being spoiled. She's being 6. But you notice, watching her cry into your shoulder, something you can't quite name yet, a small itch of a thought you don't have language for. 20 feet away, at the same party, a different kid is sitting calmly at a picnic table, maybe 8 years old, coloring on the back of a paper plate with a crayon he brought himself, having just been told no about the same cotton candy machine by his mother, a woman you happen to know, quietly, could buy the entire party company that rented the machine without checking her balance first. He didn't argue. He didn't cry. He just said, okay, and went back to his drawing, the way you'd expect an adult to react to a minor inconvenience, not the way you'd expect an 8-year-old to react to being denied sugar at a party. You've known this family for 6 years. You know, in the specific quiet way you know things about people whose wealth doesn't announce itself, that their net worth sits somewhere north of $40 million, built over 3 generations, none of it visible in the minivan they drove to this party, or the shorts and t-shirt the mother's wearing right now. You watch her son go back to coloring, unbothered, and you think, for the first time in 6 years of knowing this family, there's something this kid already knows that your daughter doesn't, and it has nothing to do with money in the way you'd expect. The wealthiest families don't teach their kids to want less. They teach them, earlier than anyone else, what no actually means when it doesn't come from scarcity. That's the whole thesis, and it took you years of watching this specific family up close to understand it, because the lesson is nearly invisible unless you know exactly where to look. You get your chance to look closer about 4 months later, when your daughter gets invited to a birthday party at their house, an actual house, the kind with a name for the guest wing, though nobody there ever calls it that or seems to think it's worth mentioning. You're standing in the kitchen with the mother, whose name is Adora, watching the kids run through a yard bigger than your entire childhood block, and you notice, on the refrigerator, 3 glass jars, each with a strip of masking tape and a word written in a kid's handwriting: spend, save, give. Next to them, a small spiral notebook with columns ruled out in pencil, dates and dollar amounts in a child's careful print. Allowance system, Adora says, catching you looking, not making a big deal of it. $5 a week, split 3 ways automatically. He doesn't get a say in the split. That part's not negotiable. You ask, mostly out of curiosity, whether the chores that earn the $5 are anything special, expecting some elaborate system, and she laughs, actually laughs, and says no, it's the opposite. The money's not tied to chores at all. He does chores because he lives here. The money's separate. We didn't want him thinking work and money are the same conversation before he's even old enough to understand either one properly. You think about your own daughter's allowance, $5 for making her bed for a week, and something in that comparison sits uncomfortably in your chest, though you can't yet say exactly why. The first quiet lesson: money isn't a reward for being good. It's a tool you learn to handle on a schedule, whether you did anything to deserve it that particular week or not. You watch her son come inside for water, and without being asked, he takes exactly 1 glass, drinks half of it, and puts it back down instead of leaving it on the counter, the specific small competence of a kid who's been trusted with small things long enough that trust has become a habit instead of a performance. The restaurant scene happens almost by accident, the 2 families ending up at the same steakhouse after a Little League game, a dozen kids and adults crowded around 2 pushed-together tables, and you watch, without meaning to turn it into an experiment, how differently the kids order. Your daughter, now 7, scans the menu the way kids scan menus at restaurants they don't often get taken to, top to bottom, eyes catching on the biggest, most expensive-sounding items, landing eventually on the $22 kids' filet with a side of truffle fries, because it sounds important, because ordering something that sounds important feels, at 7, like a form of being seen. Adora's son orders the same $6 grilled cheese he orders everywhere, unprompted, without checking the price first, because he's not choosing based on what the number signals. He's choosing based on what he actually wants to eat, which happens to be the same thing he wants to eat most places, and the fact that his family could buy the restaurant chain has exactly zero bearing on which sandwich sounds good to an 8-year-old on a Tuesday. You mentioned this to Adora quietly, near the end of the meal, half joking, asking how he ended up so unimpressed by expensive things at an age when most kids are drawn straight to them. She thinks about it for a second, genuinely, like it's a fair question rather than a compliment she's used to fielding. "He's never once seen us get excited about a price tag," she says. "Not the low ones, not the high ones. We don't do the thing where we act thrilled about a deal, and we don't do the thing where we act impressed by something expensive either. Kids copy the emotional reaction, not the number. If you never show them the number means anything, they stop assuming it does." The second quiet lesson: kids don't learn what things cost. They learn how their parents feel about what things cost, and they copy the feeling, perfectly, years before they understand the math underneath it. You think about every time you've said, in front of your daughter, "Ooh, that's a good deal," or, "Wow, that's expensive." Dozens of small reactions you never thought twice about, each one quietly teaching her that the number on a price tag is worth an emotional response, is worth excitement, or alarm, long before she has any framework for judging value on her own. The real conversation, the one that explains everything else, happens on Adora's back porch on the evening you weren't expecting to turn into anything, both of you watching the kids catch fireflies in the last of the light, while her husband grills something you can smell but not yet see. You ask her, finally, directly, the question you've been circling for months: how does she do this on purpose, this specific calm around money that her son already has and your daughter, despite your best efforts, doesn't? She's quiet for a second, and then she tells you something you didn't expect, a family story instead of a parenting technique. Her husband's grandfather built the first version of the family's money, a manufacturing business, back in the 1960s, and lost almost all of it in a single bad decade in the 80s, overexpansion, bad timing, a recession that caught the whole industry sideways. The family went from comfortable to genuinely strained for the better part of 6 years, her father-in-law a teenager watching his own father rebuild from close to nothing, watching what that rebuilding cost the man in ways that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with what fear does to a person over time. He rebuilt it, Adora says. Better the second time, actually, more careful. But he made a decision somewhere in those 6 hard years, and he passed it down like a family recipe. The money is never allowed to be the main character in front of the kids. Not when it's gone, not when it comes back, not ever. Because he watched what it did to his own father's personality, both losing it and getting it back, and he decided his grandkids weren't going to learn that same nervous system. The third deepest lesson: the goal was never keeping the kids from feeling scared about money. It was keeping the kids from learning that money is the kind of thing worth being scared about at all. You sit with that for a long moment, watching your own daughter chase a firefly across the lawn, laughing, 7 years old and completely unaware that 2 adults 20 feet away are discussing the exact architecture of the nervous system she's currently building for the rest of her life. You try it, after that porch conversation, quietly, without telling anyone what you're doing, the way you've done most things about money your whole life. You stop reacting to prices in front of your daughter, cold turkey, the way you'd quit a habit you finally noticed. No more, "Ooh, what a deal." No more sharp intake of breath at a restaurant check. You practice, deliberately, the same flat, unbothered tone Adora uses, whether something costs $4 or $400, and it's harder than you expect, because the habit runs so much deeper than you realized, decades of your own nervous system reacting to numbers the way you were taught to, long before you had this money at all. You start an allowance for her, split 3 ways like Adora's jars, unconnected to chores, on a schedule regardless of behavior, and you watch her, over months, slowly stop treating money as a mood and start treating it as a fact, the same way she treats the weather or the calendar, present, sometimes inconvenient, never a referendum on how good a day she's having. The real test comes about a year later, at another birthday party, a different one this time, your daughter 8 years old now, standing at the edge of a different bounce house, and someone offers to buy her a second round of cotton candy, and you watch her, actually watch her, consider it for a second and then say, easily, without performance, without a flicker of the old meltdown, "No thanks, I already had one." Not because you told her no. Because nobody needed to. The wanting arrived, got weighed, and passed on its own, the exact small competence you watched in Adora's son at that first party, now quietly showing up in your own kid, a full year later, earned one flat, uneventful reaction to a price tag at a time. You can't buy this lesson for a kid, and you can't teach it in a single conversation either. You can only stop performing the fear long enough for them to notice you've stopped, and wait for them to copy the silence instead of the alarm. You're back at a birthday party again, a few years further on now, your daughter 11, sitting at a picnic table coloring instead of standing at the edge of a bounce house at all, because bounce houses stopped interesting her around 9, and you catch yourself doing the thing you do now without meaning to, watching other kids' reactions to being told no. The small unconscious research project you never officially decided to run, but have been running for years anyway. A younger cousin melts down nearby over a denied second slice of cake, the exact meltdown your daughter used to have, and you watch your own kid glance over at the commotion with a flicker of something that isn't superiority, just mild, genuine confusion, the specific confusion of someone who's forgotten that a no ever used to feel like the end of the world. You think about Adora's fridge, the 3 jars with the masking tape labels, the 6 hard years her father-in-law lived through that taught an entire family, generation after generation, that the real inheritance was never the money at all. It was the specific, teachable calm of hearing, not this time, from someone who could easily have said yes, and understanding, all the way down, that the answer wasn't a verdict on how loved you were. It was just an answer, about one thing, on one day, and there'd be another chance to ask again tomorrow if it still mattered by then. You never did tell your daughter what you were doing, all those quiet years of flattening your own reactions in front of her, retraining a nervous system you'd carried since your own childhood so she wouldn't have to carry the same one. She'll probably never know it was deliberate. She'll just grow up assuming money was always this boring, this ordinary, this thoroughly unremarkable in your house, the same quiet inheritance Adora's family passed down for 3 generations, dressed up as nothing more than a habit nobody ever bothered to explain.